Hey, welcome. Today we're going to break down a really cool Christmas sermon. It takes this huge, profound theological idea and boils it down to a simple, modern metaphor. And honestly, the whole thing kicks off with one pretty disarming question. Let's get into it.
So picture this. A moving truck pulls up on your street, right? You're probably a little curious, maybe you peek out the window, you might even go over and say hello. Well, the sermon we're looking at today frames the entire story of Christmas with that exact scenario. What if? What if the new neighbor was God? I mean, what would that even mean? And more importantly, why would he move in?
Okay, so the key to this whole idea, it actually comes from this one verse in the Gospel of John. This is really the foundation for the entire sermon. It says that a divine being called the Word became flesh, took on a human body, and literally moved into our neighborhood.
Now, you would be wondering, what exactly is the Word? Well, in the original Greek text, the word is logos. And for the people hearing this back then, logos was a huge concept. It meant something like the ultimate reason, the divine mind, or the wisdom that holds the entire universe together. So the sermon is basically saying that this cosmic intelligence, this grand logic of the universe, actually became a person.
So, why did God move in? According to the sermon, it all boils down to three big reasons. First, to actually dwell with us. Second, to reveal what God is really like. And third, to pull off a kind of rescue mission. We're going to walk through each one of these. All right, let's tackle that first point, pitching a tent with us. See, when that verse says God dwelt among us, the original word is way more specific. It literally means to pitch a tent or to tabernacle. Think about that for a second. This isn't God in some far-off, distant palace. This is God camping out right here, right in the middle of humanity. It's humble, it's temporary, and it's incredibly close. And this imagery of a tent is so important because it makes a direct connection to the Old Testament. Back then, God's presence was said to live in a physical tent, a special one called the tabernacle. So the argument the sermon is making is that this same divine presence, this glory, has now just moved. It's moved into a new kind of dwelling, a human body. There's actually a specific term for this, which the sermon brings up, the Shekinah glory. That's the name for the visible, tangible, radiant presence of God that would fill that old tabernacle. So the point is, Jesus becomes the new, walking, talking tabernacle. He is the Shekinah glory, but now in the flesh.
So why is this such a big deal? Because by pitching his tent with us, God wasn't just an observer on the sidelines, he was a participant. He was experiencing it all. The sermon really drives us home. He felt joy. He celebrated at weddings. He got angry. And maybe most importantly, he felt deep sorrow. He lived a complete, messy, full human life.
And to really illustrate this point, the sermon uses this incredibly powerful story about Pastor Tim Keller right after 9/11. His church was near ground zero, and it was just filled with grieving, broken people asking, what could his God possibly offer them in that moment? And Keller's answer was this: Christianity is the only faith that says a God lost a child in an act of violent injustice. It's a God who gets suffering because he has suffered. That shared experience, that's what makes real empathy possible.
Okay, so that brings us to the second big reason God moved into the neighborhood. It wasn't just about being present or being empathetic. It was about revelation. It was about finally putting a face to God.
I mean, think about it. This is the question that's at the heart of pretty much all religion and philosophy, right? If God is invisible, if he's this ultimate cosmic being, what is he actually like? How can we know his character, his personality? Well, the sermon has a fantastic story to help explain the answer. All right, so the story goes like this. You're in a theater in San Francisco. It's totally packed. And on stage, there's a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. Everyone's trying to be the best imitation of the real thing. Now, here's the kicker. The real Charlie Chaplin, the man himself, secretly entered his own look-alike contest, and he came in second. The judges actually thought someone else was a better copy of Charlie Chaplin than Charlie Chaplin was. And the point of this story in the sermon is absolutely crucial. Jesus isn't presented as a look-alike of God, some flawed imitation. He is the original, the perfect, authentic representation. So the big theological takeaway here is pretty simple. If you want to know what the invisible God is really like, you look at Jesus. The message is that he is the complete, totally accurate picture of God's character full of grace and truth. And that brings us to the third and final piece of the puzzle, the ultimate why behind this whole story. God didn't just move into the neighborhood to be with us or to be known by us.
He moved in to do something for us. This was a mission.
To get this idea across, the sermon uses another powerful story. It's about an American missionary who goes to Manila and visits this massive garbage dump. And he is just stunned to find that tens of thousands of people call this place home. They are born there, they live there, they raise their families there, and they die there.
But here's what shocked him even more. He found other missionaries who had chosen to be there. They had left their comfortable homes, their comfortable lives, to go and live in that garbage dump, just to serve the people. And the sermon draws a direct, powerful parallel. That is the message of Christmas. It's about God leaving the perfection of heaven to enter our broken world on a mission.
And the motivation for this mission? Well, it's spelled out in what is probably the most famous verse in the entire Bible. The sermon frames this whole thing as an act of love. It's a rescue mission, plain and simple, designed to save, not to condemn.
Yeah, and that distinction is so important. The sermon really makes it clear that God didn't move into the neighborhood to be a building inspector, pointing out everyone's flaws. No, it was a rescue mission. He came to a world that was in deep trouble, a world that needed saving, to provide a way out.
So let's bring it all together. What's the big takeaway? The sermon takes these three huge ideas, God's presence, God's revelation, and God's rescue mission, and it boils them all down to one very personal conclusion. God moved into the neighborhood for you.
And this is where the sermon leaves us, with one final, very provocative question. It shifts everything from this big, cosmic idea down to a personal decision. If the story is true, if God really did move into the neighborhood on a rescue mission specifically for you, then there's really only one question left to answer. What's your response?